Okay, gewaltig. The Heilige Gemara. We're starting from the Mishnah, but I just want to do a quick review of what we learned on the Erev Shabbos, because there were some very important halachas. So the first thing we learned is that don't try to apply an alcoholic with booze, because all they're going to do is say Hareni Nazir, and they're not even going to mean it. And they're just going to mean to answer that kais on them, but they're going to try to push you off. But the next Mishnah had three important cases with Reb Shimon and the Chachamim that we have to sort out.
Rabbi, I didn't know we learned on Erev Shabbos. I thought it was Thursday.
That's right. I meant with my. That's right. This we learned Thursday night with you with the Daniel or the only.
Oh, I thought I missed something.
No, you didn't miss anything at all. I'm not doing anything. So we learned three halachas of Reb Shimon. So we know there's a famous machlokes between Reb Shimon and the Chachamim when you're Makabel Naziris and you specify individual isur. Maybe you say Hareni Nazir Stam, you're for sure a Nazir. But what if you said Hareni Nazir min hayayin? So you only specified one of the isurim and not all of them. So we learned that according to the Chachamim, that's a full-blown Kabbalas Naziris, and you are prohibited from all of the things that a Nazir is prohibited from. But according to Reb Shimon, if you say Hareni Nazir min hayayin, you are not a Nazir at all, because you have to answer yourself from all of the things that a Nazir is also from. And that would be the second case of the Mishnah. So I never accepted upon myself a prohibition for wine. Hareza Asr. The Chachamim hold it's still a Kabbalas Naziris. Reb Shimon Matir, because he holds a Kabbalas Naziris of only one item is not a proper Kabbalas Naziris. The question is, what if someone said, Hareni Nazir Almanas Sheishoisa Yain Mitamel Mason? He's trying to do the same thing. He wants Naziris, but he doesn't want all of the Isurim. He did it with a Tanai. So we learned that that's called Masne al Mashakos of the Torah. So even though according to Reb Shimon, if you only accepted upon yourself one item of Naziris, you're not a Nazir at all. If you try doing the same thing, but you use the mechanism of a Tanai, then you are a Nazir and your Tanai doesn't work because you're Masne al Mashakos of the Torah. So that's how the Gemara explained these first two cases. Now there was a Shita who held that Reb Shimon argues in the first case as well, because he holds that when someone says Hareni Nazir Almanas, it really means chutz. It really means he doesn't want to accept upon himself everything, but it's not a Tanai. But everybody agrees that Masne al Mashakos of the Torah, the mice is kind, the Tanai is butter. The third case was the interesting one, because what happened was it seems like this person was mekabel the full Naziris, because the person said Yedani Shan Nazir Ashabiyayin. I thought that the Chachamim are going to be matter me to drink wine, or maybe to be Mitamel Mason, because I have a special reason. I need to drink wine because I can't survive without wine, or I need to be able to become Tamei because my job entails working with Mason. So there we have a machlokes that's exactly the opposite of what we had until now. In this case, it's the Rabbanan who said mutter and Reb Shimon said also. The Gemara had three approaches. The easiest and first approach was just flip it around. Say Reb Shimon is mater and Rabbanan are aser, because it's not a complete Kabbalas Naziris. However, the Gemara had two other pshatim. One pshat was the concept of keboiloi kach poiltoi, meaning the same way you accept Naziris, that's how you have to reject Naziris. So therefore, when you're talking about being shoyal on Naziris, they'll have inverse positions. So to be clear, the Chachamim held if you're even only mekabel Naziris from Yayin, you're a full Nazir. That's on the way in. So therefore, on the way out, if you're a full Nazir and you're only shoyal on one of the Isurim, on one of the prohibitions, it knocks off your Naziris completely. And that's how he learns this case. You're a full Nazir, but you couldn't handle not drinking wine. So you were shoyal on the wine portion of Naziris. Zogin de Chachamim Hareza Mutter, it knocks off the entire Naziris. Reb Shimon says, the same way where in order to be Makabel Naziris, you have to be Makabel every component of Naziris. So too when you're shoyal, you have to be shoyal on the entire Naziris, not on different parts. In other words, there's no line item veto. You have to be shoyl on everything, otherwise it's not a she'ela at all. That was the second pshat the Gemara had. And the third pshat the Gemara had was that we're talking about a completely different type of Naziris, and it's called Nidrei Einstein. We learned that Nidrei Einstein, the Brisa said that the Chachamim were matter Nidrei Einstein. The case of Nidrei Einstein is someone made a nether, I'm going to come to you to eat supper Tuesday night, and if not, I'm answering Kol Perish Roilam Alai. And I was planning to come, but at the last second, I had a flat tire, my car broke down, something happened that I would not have anticipated. It was a complete illness. There, the Chachamim say, it's no Kabbalah, it's not another at all. But there's a machlokes what that means. I think Reb Asi said that you still have to midirabban and go to a rabbi to be shoyal on the nether. Reb Asi said. Shmuel said, what are you talking about? If the Chachamim say it's mutter, it's mutter. So the Gemara wants to say that is exactly what our case is over here as well. It was considered a nidrei einstein, and Tosfos explains because when she made the nether, when the person was makabel naziris, they thought they can handle not drinking wine, and then something changed in their life and now they require wine. Or when the person was makabel naziris, he didn't need a job, and suddenly he lost all his money after he became a nazir, and now he needs to work in a funeral home, and he needs to be mitama. So it's a nidrei einstein because he didn't anticipate when he made this naziris that this would be required, and therefore it falls onto this category of nidrei einstein, where there's a machlokes if you require she'elu to a rav or not. And that's why in that pshat in this Mishnah is that someone was makabel naziris and he realized that he can't do it. It's an oinus. Does he have to be shoyl to a rav or not? So according to the Chachamim, he doesn't have to be shoyl to a rav. They pass him like Shmuel, who holds that nidrei einstein does not need any heter whatsoever. And Reb Shimon would hold that nidrei einstein do require shoyl to chacham, so it's also until he's shoyl to the chacham. Okay. That took care of that sugya. Now we're ready to start the Mishnah on Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis. Zokt the Heilige Mishnah. Hareini Nazir. I am a Nazir. Commitment number one. V'alai legaleach Nazir. And I'm also making a second commitment that I'm going to find another Nazir and I'm going to sponsor his karbanis. V'shama chaverei, and his friend heard, wow, I love that idea. V'amar vani, I also want to be like my friend. Now, va'ani means I'm accepting the same commitment as my friend made. Well, my friend made two commitments. So which commitment, or are they both commitments? That's something the Gemara is going to discuss. But he said va'ani and v'alai legalayach nazir. So clearly from his word, va'ani means he's accepting upon himself the naziris, and then the commitment to pay for somebody else's karbanis, he itemized separately, v'alai legalayach nazir. Well, the second commitment happened to have been it could have been anything, but the case here was that
Is he supposed to say gam?
Could have been the same thing.
He didn't say gam.
Could have been the same thing.
Yeah.
So the halacha is, so since we each have a chiyuv naziris and we each have a chiyuv to pay for someone else's naziris, do we have to pay for two karbanos, or can we figure out a way to get away with only paying for one set of karbanos? If these two people were clever, they'll each pay for each other's karbanos, and then it takes care of both commitments, and they only have to each pay for one set of karbanos. But the imlav, if they don't do that, well then each person has to pay for his own carbon, and then they'll have to find somebody else to sponsor for it. What's missing? Hareini Nazir.
That's smart. They wouldn't become a Nazir. So smart they wouldn't become a Nazir. Yeah.
Someone could sponsor for you. No, because every Nazir who says Hareini Nazir is allowed to let somebody sponsor his karbanos. So he's not saying that I have to pay for them. He has to bring them, and somebody else could sponsor. Even a korban chatas, if you owe a korban chatas, somebody else could sponsor it. You can always get a sponsor. So Shmuel Ehrman told me over he saw on one of the internet sites about the daf a fascinating story that came to the Ben Ish Chai. There were two very wealthy people that were suffering from a certain sorrow. So they accepted upon themselves that if we get out of this sorrow, we're each going to give $100,000 to tzedakah. And Baruch Hashem, they were saved, but they lost all their money. And now they were not in the position to be able to pay $100,000. So they were trying to find a way to be matir another, as hectares to be matir another. They were struggling. So they went to the Ben Ish Chai. And the Ben Ish Chai says, I have a simple solution. Find a third guy who has an extra $100,000 that he can lend to one of you guys. The first guy will borrow that $100,000 and give it to tzedakah to the second guy. Then the second guy can give it back to tzedakah to the first guy, and then the first guy can pay it back. Simple as that. And he says, and you see that in the Mishnah. You see exactly that in the Mishnah. So you were asking me if it's negated to other commitments. About the Ben Ish Chai applied it to any commitment. Simple way to get around that. That's only if the third guy trusts you. Yeah, it's there's a very famous story with a Koilinger man. He didn't have any money. He wasn't a businessman. We went over to his friend who was a big businessman. He said, I need to borrow $100,000 cash from you for an hour. So his friend says, like, what do you need $100,000 of cash for an hour? It's ridiculous. He says, I'm an ehrlich guy. You know I'm not going to steal it from you. I promise you, I'm going to give you back $100,000. What are you doing? What are you going to be doing with $100,000 an hour? Please don't ask me any questions. I'm your friend. You could trust me. You know I'm not going to rip you off. Just lend me the money. So he said, fine. So he lends him $100,000 cash, and his friend disappears. An hour later, he comes back, and he gives him back $100,000. He says, okay, you did it already. You paid me back. Tell me what it was about. He said, I was taking a probe to be a rov in a shul, and I had to speak. So lotzach besser reden mit $100,000 in tash. I was getting tested. I was going to have to give a speech, a model speech. You could speak with a lot more confidence when there's $100,000 in your pocket. Okay. Zok the Gemara weiter. Iboyalu. The Gemara has a shayla. Shama chaveirai omar vahni. Your friend heard and said vani. So similar to the case in our Mishnah. Mahu. Do we say vani akuloi diburei mashma? Is vani accepting upon yourself the two commitments that your friend made? Or maybe vani only accepts upon yourself one of the two commitments that your friend made. And if you're going to tell me that vani only accepts one of the commitments of your friend, which one? Aresha, was it his first commitment? Or Yasefa, or was it a second commitment? So we can see there's an obvious raya from our Mishnah. Tashma, vani, ve'alai l'galeich nazir. In other words, since he wanted to take on both commitments of his friend, he had to say both vani and v'alai l'galeich nazir. In hoyu pikchem megalchen zeh. So let's analyze this, Dr. Gemara. Midikamer vani ve'alai, from the fact that the Mishnah said that in order for him to be mechuyev in both items, he had to say both vani and v'alai. Shemami no vani apalge d'dibur. It proved that if he only would have said vani, it would only have been mechayiv him with one of the two commitments that his friend made. Amri Zok Gemara, you're right. Apalga de dibur mashma, you've proven that successfully from this Mishnah. But we have a second question. Miu aresha or yasefa? Does the vani mean that I'm accepting upon myself my friend's first commitment? Or does vani mean I'm accepting upon myself my friend's second commitment? So Gemara mina, we could bring a raya from the same Mishnah. Midikamer v'alai legaleach. What did he speak out after the vani, the second commitment? Shema mina vani al tchilas dibur mashma. So for the vani was obviously referring to the Hareni Nazir, and what he had to specify in addition to the vani was the second commitment of his friend v'alai legaleach. Beautiful. Amar Funa Rishula Rava. Maybe it's not such a raya from our Mishnah. Mimai dahachi, who? How do you know that in fact he had to say v'alai? Otherwise, the vani alone would not have been a commitment to both things. Maybe really vani, as a response to your friend's two commitments, is accepting upon yourself both of his commitments. You want to know why the Mishnah threw in that he said valai? Mike Amar, what does he mean to say with the valai? Valai b'hamilsa. It's a normal thing for someone, after he says vani, he provides a little bit more detail and he explains it. But really vani itself was the commitment for him to accept both of the commitments of his friend. He just says valai to elaborate, but that doesn't necessarily mean that without the valai, it wouldn't have been a commitment on both things. And I'll prove it to you that that's how people speak. If you don't agree with me, the Katani Sefer, the very next Mishnah that we're going to be learning today, someone said, someone said, I am going to pay for half of the karbonis of a Nazir. And his friend heard, he says, I like that idea, I'm going to join you. But then he added, there's only one commitment, yet he still repeated himself. There's only one commitment, there's not two. So why would he have repeated himself after the Vani and said, it must be because that's how people speak. So once you're saying that people are a little bit redundant in their speech, well, why can't you say that in our mission as well? And maybe the Vani was accepting upon myself both commitments of my friend, and I'm just elaborating by saying a lie. Amalei Rava said, nice try, but it's not a good kash at all. Let's analyze this. If you'll agree with me that Vani is not a commitment for both, only for one, and therefore in the Reisha he had to stick in this extra word of alai, so then I can tell you Seifa loy tricha, the alai in the Seifa surely is not needed. So why did the Mishnah throw it in? Tani Seifa, the loy tricha, Mishum Reisha the tricha. You often find that Tana likes to keep his expressions parallel, so he used the same lashon as in the first Mishnah. But in the first Mishnah, it was actually necessary for him to say that, because Vani would only be accepting the first commitment. Eli Amrit Reisha loy tricha. But you, if you want to argue, if Rav Huna, you want to argue that in the Reish it's not needed. So if that's the case, and the Sefer loy tricha, and the Sefer is not needed either, so why is the Mishnah just throwing in extra words that are not necessary? Tani Reish loy tricha, but Tani Sefer loy tricha? That's not logical. So it must be that the Mishnah had to include the Valai in the Reisha, because otherwise it would not have been, the Vani would not have been a commitment on both items. So at the Maskana is the Vani is a commitment for the first item that my friend said, and the second thing that my friend said, the second commitment my friend made, I have to repeat the alai for. I'm sorry? That's just no, it's Tani Reisha, the Sefer. A person just threw it in, but it's not necessary. Okay, now we're going to get into another genius idea that got everybody into trouble. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, some genius decides to tell a shliach the following: say, go out, the kaddish li isha stam. Go find me a wife. Go find me a wife. I don't want to know who she is. I don't care where she's from. You just find me a wife and then let me know who you found for me. What a genius. And then what happened is umesa shliach. So the shliach goes and he's waiting for the shliach to tell him who his wife is, and the shliach dies. So now he could be married to anybody. So now he's stuck. Asur b'chol hanoshim shaboilim. He's asur on every woman in the world. You know why? Because any woman that he might want to marry could be his wife's sister, could be his wife's daughter, could be his wife's mother.
You can marry a Geras. How about a Geras who has not been married before?
Yeah, maybe he could do that. Yeah. So asur b'chol hanoshim shaboilim.
You can marry a woman who was married, her husband died. It's not everybody in the world.
Those are all beautiful, and you're being mechavan to the Gemara later. Peter, it's obvious to everybody that this is not your first time around. So now,
first of all, it is. And I have a vort on this. If you want to hear a quick vort, Avram sent Eliezer to be a shliach to get a wife for Yitzchak, right?
So I was about to ask. Avram did the same thing. That was exactly my question. I was going to ask.
So the question was, so Besuel wanted to poison him. He sat down to eat, and Eliezer said, "I'm not eating till I have a discussion with you."
Right.
So you told him, "Listen, I know you want to poison me, but it's not going to work. You want Yisrael to marry, but it's not going to work because Avram said he told me that it's only somebody from my family. So if you do it, poison me, you can still marry somebody. You can marry somebody that's not from my family."
Oh! I wanted to be more. And that's if you look at the Mefarish says, "Shall I pierce loy be'ezeh ir be'ezeh isha?" But Avram did give Eliezer guidance as to where he should go. So Avram didn't do this foolish move.
So that's what he told us. You're not going to accomplish anything by poisoning me. Actually, there's a word that the Malach switched the plates. There's a whole medrash on that.
Okay, gewaltig. So let's see the Gemara weiter. Why is it maybe the shliach, if he died, maybe he never accomplished the shlichus, maybe he never was mekadosh lady. Chazaka shliach oiseh shlichusa. There's a chazaka that if someone's your shliach, he'll do your shlichus. I wish that applied to employees today. I don't think that applies anymore. The chiv and the light parts, like since we do not know who the woman who he was mekadosh is, halayada hainiu kadosh. Correct Tosfos a bomba dikakash. Also b'chol hanoshim shaba'olam. In time of correct Tosfos, why is he the only person who's also? Every single woman now is a suffix eshes ish. In time of b'chula alma yesru lisa noshim. No one in the world should be able to get married. The Shem Ezois, he sheniskach al yidei shliach. Very good, very good. According to Rebbeinu Tam, a woman could say, it wasn't me, so I could get married. That's very good, adults. But but a ketana whose father could have been mekabel from the shliach kedushin, and she wouldn't know about it. Especially if her father died already. Now it's possible that my father was mekabel kedushin. Yes. So at the end of the day, so are you telling me that no such girl should be able to marry ever again? Right here, we're only answering this genius, but everybody else doesn't have a problem. The midiraisa afilu hu shari lisa. Avada midiraisa, you go basaroy, and surely he could marry any woman that he wants. Dazlina basaruba. Kloimar mikroivais, a kloimar, I'm sorry, the loy mikroivais hamikudeshasi. You can assume that roiv women are not relatives of the woman who is his wife. The einoy knasa ba'alma, it's only a knas because if this guy did something so reckless. She'asa shliach stam v'lei pirish loy kadesh leploinis. Uledidu kansu ula achrinu loy kansu. Only he got gekanzit, but nobody else gets gekanzit. It's a knas because when ikar din you can go basarai. I want the time. It's not a knas. It's to prevent any woman from marrying a jerk. So by saying he can't get married, you're saving all these women from marrying this jerk. Okay, gewaltig.
Why can't they marry women jerks?
Vilahave isura deraisa. Frek Toises, maybe it should be an issue deraisa. So we know there's a rule. If you have a plaza, and in the plaza there are 10 butcher stores, and out of the 10 butcher stores, 9 of them sell kosher meat, and 1 of them sells treifa meat, and you went into one of the stores, you weren't focused on which store you were in, your wife sent you shopping, you didn't want to go shopping, and you come home and your wife says, great, which store do you buy from? He says, I don't know, one of the stores. She says, you know there's a treifa store there. He said, yeah, but roiv of them were kosher. That doesn't work. Because kol kavua kamech talmechza. If you went in to the place of the Isser, we don't say that's 50-50. We say that's 50-50. We don't say you go B'Tzarai. But on the other hand, what if you pull your car up into the parking lot of the plaza and you open the door to get out, to go to the store, and right there on the floor is a package of meat. Exactly what your wife was looking for. Beautiful. I don't even have to get out of my car. I take the package of meat and I go home and I tell my wife, I bought you the meat. She says, yeah, but I was looking for brisket, not for steak. What's the difference? It was on sale. I got it. She said, which store did you get it from? I don't know. I found it in the parking lot. Yep, I can use it because you can assume it's kosher because where was the suffix noilod? After this, separated from where it was. But when you're looking at a woman, you're going to the woman to be mekadesher. That should be considered like kavua. It should be kemech tal mechza. So in fact, it should be a nisher doiraisa, and therefore everyone should be aser. The Yeshloim is Toisvis, the loyamrinon kavua kamechza dami elo keshe iser nikir la'atzmoi. That's only where the iser stands out. You can see it, like in the case of the Teisha Chanuyos, the store that's aser. We know it's clear this store is aser. It's defined. But a heter nikir la'atzmoi. Here you don't know what woman is mutter, where you don't see any clear isser, any clear heter anywhere. Therefore, lo yamrinon kavu. That's why it's not kavu. So this is a yisoid to the toises, because this gets into the big shilas of sveikus. So it's teaching us that when do you say kol kavu kamechza mechza? That's only if there's a clearly defined heter and a clearly defined isser. If nothing's clearly defined, you go basarai. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so let's see the heilige Gemara weiter. So what in the world does this have to do? You could say it's low, but everyone else is at home. So what does this have to do with Nazir? So we're soon going to see. Esvei Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan the following kasha. The halacha is, Kantasuma. What happens if somebody was a Zov and he was becoming Tahar? So part of his process is to bring a pair of birds. Shtei Torim or Shnei B'nayoyna. One will be a Chatas and one will be a Noila. And he set aside a set of birds. He had not yet designated which would be the Chatas, which would be the Oila, but he already was makdash them. These will be Markabonis. And one of these two birds flew to coop. Sheparcha goizel echad mehen lavira oilam. Literally flew to coop. It went free. Oi or sheparcha levin chatois hamesais. It got mixed in with other birds that were from the category of chatois hamesais. Now, what is chatois hamesais? There's 5 types of carbon chatases that there's nothing you could do with them. You just let them drop dead. You starve them to death. And they're listed by the word simna, visimna. Visimna haya pilegesh esav. Not sure why they picked that word, but it's visimna. So vava visimna stands for vlat chatos.
Haisa pilegesh.
I'm sorry?
Simna haisa.
Haisa, thank you. She was female. You know, today, you have to be careful when you say that today, because maybe she identified as a man. So vava visimna is the Rosh of vlat chatos. So a chatas is a female animal. What if the animal gives birth? What do you do with that baby? With the shlom, you can bring it to shlomim, but a chatas you can't. So that baby has to be left to die. Sof stands for temuras chatas. So you made a temura on the korban chatas. Then there's mem stands for mesu baileha. The bala carbon died. So now you don't need the kapara anymore. Nun is nischaper baileha. For instance, he lost it and he took another animal and he was makavit and then they found it. And ayin is over shnosa. If it's over the age that it becomes too old, you don't bring it on time, and it's over the age that a chatas can be brought. All these chatois you can't do anything with. So if one of your birds got mixed in to other birds that were chatois and mesois, so that's it. It's for all practical purposes. It's gone. Or one of the pair died. What do? The halach is yikach zug l'sheni. All you do is you dead another bird. Since you haven't identified which is which, you just get another bird, and then you can designate which one will be your chatos and which one will be your oila. The ilu kain mefureshes. What if you already designated one was the chatos, one was the oila, and you don't know which one flew away? Then ain't like takana. Then you have no takana at all because you can't use the remaining bird because you don't know if it's the oila or if it's the chatos. So you would have to start all over again. But listen to what's going on over here. We have a bird that's roaming the world somewhere, that's someone's carbon, and you wouldn't be able to use it for any other carbon. Well, what if someone picks up a bird to use as his carbon? It might be somebody else's carbon, and he can't use it. So frekt Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan bilushar kinin ba'alma, any other bird in the world miskinon you can use. V'amai. Why did you say every other bird is a suffix? Maybe this is the bird that we're missing. Le'mikol chada v'chada dil mahainu. So right away, Tosfos asks, "What's the kasha?" Even in our case, we're not choshid. It's only a knas on this guy. So why are we worried about everyone else's birds? The same way everybody else could get married, everybody else could use a bird. So what's the kasha? That's right. Right, it is called a barge, but his kasha is, if you're answering him, why don't you answer the bird? Correct. So the question over here is, what's the kasha? Rav is talking about anybody else who finds a bird can use it. Even if there's a knas, the knas not on everybody else, but the issue the knas was on everybody else. Everybody else can get married. This guy can't get married. But here you're asking me why anybody can use it. Everybody's not in the knas. So that's Tosfos' kasha. Zog Tosfos, Zog Tosfos, v'ilukinin ba'alma misaknon b'mai le'mekol chada v'chadahu. Zog Tosfos, Dilma oiso sheporach. Maybe it's that bird that flew away. This has already been designated as one of Reuven's karbanos. And the kasha is, how can anybody else use any bird? It might be that bird, and anybody else cannot use it for their carbon. The same way they didn't cancel anybody else from getting married, why would they cancel anybody else from using this bird? So what is Rava's kasha? The match Malay, the Sharakin the Alma, Afil Reuben miskin. What happens? Reuben has to bring a carbon because he was a Zov. What if 6 months later he became a Mitzayr and now he's got to discharge this Mitzayr? So now he's going to go out 2 new birds. For him, you should cancel any bird that he's going to get might be the bird from last carbon. If it's already designated for the Ziva of before, how could he use it for the Taras of today? And that's what the question is. The Shlemer the Mash Malay, the Shar Kin the Alma, Afil Reuven Miskin, Im Yitztorch Lekan Echad Leziva Acheres. V'amai Hakantul Lidei. Why don't they cancel him? Just like by the Isha they canceled him, Hachanami you can sue. What was his Avila? Shalei Shar Markine. He didn't keep him in a chicken coop. He didn't keep him in a cage. He wasn't careful with him. So let's be choshid that anytime he tries to bring another bird, maybe it's the bird that escaped from his first set. Well, then you got to be careful. So the halacha is he could use it. We don't say that, right? So why don't you say that? So Zok the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan got frustrated with Rish Lakish. What type of question is that? Omer, I don't understand your Rish Lakish. Kamina Ana Isha. I'm talking about a woman. Beloy Naida. She doesn't fly. She stays home. So it's more, although it's not really kavua, it's like kavua. It's similar to kavua. She's in her place. But Amrtli at Isur denied. You ask me if my bird flies around? Come on. No gotcha. Avada there, it's not going to be a problem. The Chitema Hachanami Nayid. Well, what are you talking about? It's possible that the woman was also night. Who said that he found this woman in her home? Maybe he found her by the well, like Eliezer found Rivka. Maybe Omer B'Shuka Ashkach v'Kadosh Osam v'Kadosh Kama. Maybe he found her in the shuk, and she was also a Porish. He found her in the parking lot, like Joel said, like the piece of meat, right? Zok the Gemara, I'm not home. It's only for the Olam at home. I hope the Olam is listening with headphones. Zok the Gemara, Hasam. Hasam. Oh boy. Hasam. There's certain people I don't want to start up with. Huh?
This is not being recorded, is it?
Hasam Hadra Lilichusa. At the end of the day, this woman, even if she was Mekudeshes in the shuk, she goes home. She stays home. One of the Mefarshim say, Kol Kfuda Basmelech Pnima. But the birds fly around, they're free as a bird, as they say. The bird is free as a bird. So that's really not anything like Kavua, and therefore there's no place to make a Gzera. The only place where they cancel him is Lagabe, a woman. And that's to the benefit of all other women, i.e. David's Kasha. There's plenty of jerk women too. I'm not sure how that works. Okay, now I really bury myself. Okay, Zok Gemara weiter. Amar Rava. Rava said, Umoide Rabbi Yochanan Isha. This is what Peter brought up right at the beginning. If you find a woman who has 0 relatives, then you'll be able to marry her. Because if she doesn't have a sister, it's impossible that you married her sister. If she doesn't have a mother, it's impossible you married her mother. So if you can find a woman with no relatives at all, or as Peter suggested, a Giyaris, that would be fine. Amar Rava, Umoide Rabbi Yochanan Isha she'ela loy bas, v'loy bas bas, v'loy bas ben. She doesn't have any daughters nor granddaughters. V'loy aim, and she doesn't have any mothers or grandmothers. V'loy achois, and no sisters. So such a woman, you'd be allowed to marry because you don't have to be concerned that you're married to her sister. But Rava sticks in one more thing. What happens if the woman that I want to marry had a sister? But we know for a fact that the day that I appointed my shliach to find a woman for me, at that day, this woman, the woman I want to marry, her sister, was married at the time. So if she was married at the time, he couldn't have been Mekadosh. She was already married. Even though the next day she got divorced. But the day that I appointed the shliach, that day she was married. So Zok Rava, a woman who has a sister, but the sister happened to have been married on the day that I was Mimana Mashliach, even though it's possible that he was Mekadesher the next day if she got divorced the next day. But since on the day that I made him a shliach, this sister was married at the time, that would be mutter. Such a woman would be mutter to marry because we know for sure he was not married to the divorced sister. How do I know that? My timer, the bahi shaita, the ka'amerle, at the time where he was memana the shliach to be mekadosh a woman for him, have a nesiva lagavri. At that moment, she was married. And a person's das, the way a person thinks is about the here and now. Therefore, kimashru shliach b'milsa de kaima kamei. When I appointed this fellow to be a shliach, I only had in mind to give him a power of attorney for women that are available right now. But I never gave him the power of attorney for a woman that I can't marry right now, even though in 10 minutes she might be divorced and I'll be able to marry her then. So therefore, kimashru shliach. So we're making a comment, Rav is making a comment on the psyche of a person. What is his intention? When he is being memana shliach, his intention is only to give out a power of attorney for something that's here and now. But the mills of the loikaima kamei, something that's not here and now, loy mashra shliach. So even though technically I might be able to give over such a power of attorney, that's not what I do. That's not my das. I'm not understanding. Well, Rava is making a statement. Rava is saying, it's not me, Rava is saying that any woman who was married at the time of my minu shlichos, that's not a woman who I included in my shlichos. So if I'm make a shlich for someone to be mekadosh a woman for me, I'm not giving him the power of attorney related to any woman who right now is not available. That's how a person thinks. That's what Rava is making. Rava is saying a halacha. That's how a person thinks. A person would not make a shliach. Sorry?
Yosy.
Is that? Could be.
Yosy.
Yes.
So are you saying that even let's say the shliach didn't know this at the time, but he did it anyway, there wouldn't be a good shlichus?
Precisely. That's what Toy says. Even if he went and mekadosh this woman, he wouldn't have been a kedushin because he never had the power of attorney to be mekadosh this woman. Correct. So Zok the Gemara, now we'll see how this is relevant to our sugya, because we're going to prove that wrong. That when a person makes a transaction, it's not based on the here and now. It even includes the future. Tanan. So you'll feel good because the Gemara is going to slug this up. Tanan we learned. Hareini Nazir, our Mishnah. I'm a Nazir. The alai legaleach Nazir. I'm also going to pay for someone else's karbanos. The shama chaveroi, and his friend heard v'amar vani and v'alai legaleach Nazir. So the halach is pikrin megachen zeh. They can each be yoycha their commitment by paying for the other fellow's karbanos. Nazir machin. Fregt the Gemara on Rava. If you say that when the person makes a statement, when he makes a transaction, he's only thinking of the here and now, or Bishlam Basra, the second fellow to accept the Naziris and to accept to pay for somebody else's carbon, there was somebody.
Does he kavana who it is when he makes the statement? He didn't know at that point. He didn't know who the friend he's going to do it to. Then the guy showed up and said, "Me too."
Correct.
So it doesn't need kavana. Is that what you're saying?
I'd rather if you wait till I finish the statement and then ask me what I meant, because I don't know what I meant before I say it. So give me like 2 minutes, and then we'll go back and analyze. So Dr. Bishlam Basra, the second fellow who accepted upon himself Naziris, when he said, "I'm going to pay for someone's karbanis," there was somebody there who he knew would need karbanis. So in the here and now, there was somebody who needed karbanis. Elakadma, the first fellow, when he said, "I'm going to pay for someone's karbanis," he clearly meant here and now. I'm going to pay for someone's karbanis who is already a Nazir. I'm going to have to seek out someone who was already a Nazir that I want to pay for his karbanis. Mi'ika basra kamei. So you Rava, who claims that people only think about the here and now, our Mishnah clearly refutes your opinion, because it's simply not true. You see a person says, "I'm going to pay for a karbanos of a Nazir," even a Nazir that might be a Nazir in the future. So why should the shlichus be any different? I'm giving you a power of attorney to find a woman for me, even though right now she might not be eligible. But if you find someone who becomes eligible, I don't only think about the here and now. I think about the future as well. Alahachi Gomer. You know what it must mean in the case of the Naziris? Imish kechana, the have a Nazir. If I find anybody who's a Nazir, even if he becomes a Nazir later, I'll pay for his karbanos. So Hachanami Rabba, when it comes to appointing somebody a power of attorney to marry a woman for you, Hachi Kamerle, Imashkachas the Migrisha, if you find a woman who was married and then got divorced, Kadishli, by all means, have her be Mekadisher for me. Okay, Peter, now that we learned the line of the Gemara, what were you asking?
No, he made the first statement that does he have to have somebody in mind? A certain specific person.
So now we see that
I'm going to sponsor somebody's carbonas. Okay, does he need? It can be anybody in the world.
He doesn't have to have anybody specific in mind. The question is, does he mean somebody who's already a Nazir, or does he also mean somebody who's going to become a Nazir later?
Well, the second person said, I'm going to be a Nazir too. So obviously he was not a Nazir yet.
That's correct. And that's exactly what the Gemara's Raya is. The Gemara's Raya is, since the second person was not a Nazir yet, it must be that when the first person made his commitment is not only for the here and now, it's also for someone who will become a Nazir in the future.
Okay.
Precisely what you're saying.
Fine.
So you are machavan to the Gemara before I say the Gemara, which is gewaltig. Zok the Gemara Amri, Zok the Gemara Amri.
I didn't go to that rodeo either.
Amri, Zok the Gemara, we're going to change what Rabbi said. Rabbi is not talking about how a person thinks, because clearly a person does think in the future. But Rabbi is saying a technical and a structural limitation of how shlichus works. And he says, if you're giving a power of attorney to somebody, you can only give them a power of attorney for something that you are actually able to do here and now. You cannot be mekadosh a woman who is currently married. Since you can't here and now be mekadosh this woman, you can't make a shliach for it either. So it's not a question of das. Das is you would think of the future, but there's a limitation to the functioning of a shlichus. Shlichus only works. You could only be memana shliach to do something that you could do now. Something that you can't do now, but you might be able to do later. You cannot be memana shliach for that. No, Maraf, we said your das isn't to do that. Technically, if I wanted to, I would be able to. But a person doesn't do that. A person doesn't think that way. Now we're saying a person definitely does think that way. And sure, when I make the shliach, I want you to marry any woman for me, even if she's divorced now and you're marrying her later. But shlichus doesn't allow me to do that. The practical halacha of the it doesn't work. That's correct. So because of that, if I find a woman who has a sister, and this sister happened to be married at the time that I was mamana the shliach, I could marry that woman. Okay, and we don't have to worry that maybe she is my wife and the shliach was makadosh her later, because as I think you said, that even if she was, Meyer said that, because even if you're makadosh her later, it won't work because you didn't have the power of attorney to marry this woman. Okay, Zok the Gemara weiter. Now we're going to attack this next thing, that shlichus. So the statement now is that shlichus, there's a structural problem with shlichus. You could only create shlichus for something that you could do right now. And now the Gemara is going to challenge it, and we're going to get a free chazara of a sugya that we learned in the Dor. Tashma, ha'omer la'apotropos shaloi. Someone hired an apotropos because he was traveling. He was traveling away. And he was afraid that his wife would make the Nedarim while he was away. And he wants to make sure to deal with them. So he told us apotropos, kol Nedarim, shetidar ishti, mikan, atcha'ava mimokim ploini. Shmuel wanted to know if this was the same man from Hungary who left when the Mashiach came. And Shmuel says, could you imagine? He went after that, he would go away again. You know the story. You know the story? I know the story. There's all the way to the end of Nedarim, we learned about if a woman was nenas, right? If she's not believed to say she was nenas, right? And we discussed what an oinus is, if she was fooled. So there was a horrific story that happened in 1869, or was it 1859? I think it was 1859. This is a true story. In 1859, it was Pashas Tetzaveh. So we're coming up to the Yortzeit. there was a Hungarian village, and people traveled for business. And there was an Ehrliche husband and wife, and the husband traveled for business. This is a shayla that came to the Aruch L'nei Rachmana Litzlan, and the husband traveled away for business, and she was home alone. And a Polish schnorrer came knocking on her door, Zeristen and Zahak. And you know how Polish are like making fun that Hungarians are stupid, right? Like a Polish one says, the Hungarian is such a smart guy. You heard about the Hungarian who got stuck on an escalator for 2 hours because the power went out, right? So this Polish guy knocks on the door, and he tells the woman at the house, I haven't eaten in days, I'm tattered, could you take me in? Could you take me in? So she took her in, she felt bad for him, and she gave him a private room, of course, that there shouldn't be any yichud, and she observed him over the couple of days that he was a very holy guy. He slept on the floor, he only drank water, he stayed up all night and learned, he was a very holy man. Friday night, he shows up in her bedroom, and he tells her, I'm Eliyahu Navi, and you are the woman, the holy woman who was chosen to be the mother of Mashiach, and your husband is not on that madrega to be the father of Mashiach, so I'm here with you, we're going to make Mashiach. And she believed him lock, stock, and barrel. She said, Ani mamin b'emunah shlema b'bias HaMashiach. And Rahman Litzlan, and he said, and to prove that this is true, I don't know if she said Ani mamin b'emunah shlema. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it happened, but she wanted to engage in the bias HaMashiach. And what happened is he told her, and I'll prove to you this true, this bucket you have in the living room on Tuesday morning is going to be full of money. And guess what? Shocker. Tuesday morning, it wasn't full of money, but he was gone. And the husband came back, and the shaila was, would she be mutter to her husband? Because she did it voluntarily, but she thought it was mutter. She thought it was a mitzvah. So the Aruch L'nei, with great difficulty, said, I will be matter her to her husband, and I'll say that she was nenas, only if you get the agreement of two other gedolim to agree to my psak, because on my own, I don't want to take such a responsibility. So that was a tragic story. So Shmuel asked me, after that happened, would he go on business again? So we're learning here, this fellow's traveling on business.
Yosy, by the way, you know that you said about Hungarian on the escalator. Hungarian, they say, is the easiest language to learn. You know why?
Why?
Because even Hungarians speak it.
I hear it.
Did he conceive?
I don't want to get thrown off of YouTube for making fun of Hungarians. All of the nedarim that my wife makes while I'm traveling, haferla, be made for them. And the shliach did his shlichus, and he was made for them. Yachol Yehumi foreign, you might think that his shlichus worked to be made for his wife's nedarim. Talmud Loimer, there's a special pasuk by nedarim that tell us that although shlichus works everywhere else, shlichus does not work for hafara, because it says isha yikimenu, isha yifirenu, dafka her husband and no one else. So even though the rules of shlichus should apply, there's a special pasuk that tells you by nedarim the rules of shlichus do not apply. Divrei Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia, what are you talking about? Of course shlichus applies. Matzinu b'chol makom sheshluchoi shel adam kamois. Zok the Gemara. According to Rabbi Yoshia, time of the Amar Rachmana Isha Yikimenu Isha Yiferen. That's the only reason why you cannot be mamana a shliach to do afara. Halav hachi. But if it wasn't for that problem, a petrupus mefer, and a petrupus could be mefer. But let's think about it. V'ila gabedidei, would the husband have been able to be mefer at that time? Because Rava just said anything that you can't do yourself now, you cannot give a power of attorney for. Well, here we see that he would have been able to give a power of attorney if it wasn't for the fact that there's a special pasuk. But other than that, he would have been able to. And I'm not sure. Someone wants to know, did she actually conceive from the Bias HaMashiach? I'm not sure. But I don't know any little boy whose name is Mashiach. Okay, so Dr. Gemara weiter. Halav hauchi. If it wasn't for the special limud, you would say apotropos mefer. But the problem is, let's look, could he himself have made the hafara?
Nachum Mendel.
V'ila gaba didei, now for sure we get thrown. V'ila gaba didei, V'ila gaba didei Tanya, he himself, if someone tells his wife, Kol nidorim shetaduri mikan v'yad she'avay mimakom ploini, I'm traveling on business. Any nidorim that you make while I am away on business, you kayamin. I want to be mekayim those nidorim. The halacha is loy amar klum. What if he said arei and mufarin? There's a machlokes. Rabbi Lezer Aimer mufar, v'chachamim Aimer einay mufar. So kasol kedai. At this point, we think ki amar Rabbi Yoshia, when Rabbi Yoshia said that it's only because of the special pasuk of Ishaya Firenu, Ishaya Kimenu, it's only because of that the shliach doesn't work. But other than that, if you apply the normal rules of shlichus, it would work. And Pashas Rabbi Yoshia is not going to wade in to the machlokes between Rabbi Lezer and the Chachamim. So he would even say his halacha aliba de Rabbanan, even according to the Rabbanan who said Einei Mefer. If you try to be Mefer your wife's adorim in advance before you leave, it wouldn't work. I'm sorry, the Rabbanan say it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work yet Rabbi Yoshia thought that a shlichus would work if it wasn't for the pasuk. So you see a clear raya from here that even something that you couldn't do yourself now, you could be mimah not shliach for. So once again, it's a kash on Rava, because Rava said something that you cannot do yourself. You can't marry this woman now, therefore you cannot make a shliach to marry her. So ki amar Rabbi Yoshia liba de Rabbanan the amri loy motzi mefer. Even according to the Rabbanan who hold that the husband himself can't be mefer, a shliach would have been able to. The ilav the amar rechmana isha yikimenu v'isha yeferenu apotropos have a mefer. The apotropos, the shliach, would be able to do it. So you have a klora raya that you can make a shliach for something that you cannot do yourself. Zok to Gemara lav davka v'dilma aliba de Rabbi Eliezer. Maybe Rabbi Yoshia only holds like Rabbi Eliezer, who holds, in fact, that it is a good afara. Never motzi mefer. Correct Gemara, I don't understand. If the husband could be made for it right now, so why does he need a shliach for? Let him just be made for it himself. Yachi lama lila shavi shliach leifer la ihu. Let him do it. Zakta Gemara kasavar he holds dilma mishtalina or reschana or mitradina. The husband is afraid. I might forget. I might get angry, and I'm not going to remember to do it, or I'll get busy with something. I wanted to be sure that it would be taken care of, so I'm making a shliach for it. But technically, I could have just as easily done it myself. So the maskana of the Gemara is Rava is sustained, and Rava says the halacha that if there's a woman that has a sister, but the sister was married at the time that I made the shliach, I would still be able to marry this woman because there's no way I was married to her sister. Beautiful. We had this case just a moment ago. I'm accepting upon myself to pay for the karbonis of a Chatzi Nazir. We're going to have to see what Chatzi Nazir means. And the Gemara is going to clarify it shortly. And his friend said, what a great idea. I'm going to do the same. And he also said, Chatzi Nazir. And remember, the Gemara's maskana was that this is redundant. But since it mentioned it in the first case, it mentions it here as well. So the halacha is, you have to pay for the full karbonos of a nazir, because there's no such thing as a half a nazir. Divrei Reb Meir. The Chacham say zeh megalei chatzi nazir, zeh megalei chatzi nazir. Well, there's a machlokes. So Amar Rava. So Rava explains the story here. Amar Rava. Hakoil Moedim, both Reb Meir and the Chacham agree. Kol heichad Amar chatzi karbonos nazir alai. I'm accepting upon myself to pay for half of the karbonos of a nazir. That's quite clear. Chatzi carbon maisi. I'm only obliging myself to pay for half of the karbonos. But what if someone said karbonos chatzi nazir alai, the full karbonos of a half a nazir? There is no such thing as a half a nazir. Therefore, kulei carbon boy yisui. Everybody would agree you have to pay for the full karbonos. The reason why in our mission there's a machlokes is because there's a little bit of a discrepancy how to interpret the words that he said. My timer, in the case of karbonos chatzi nazir, is the lo eshkach neir the palga. V'chi pligi. So where is there machlokes between the Meir and the Chachamim? The lishna the maslisim pligi. When you use the exact wording in the Mishnah, harei alai legaleach chatzi nazir. So the question really is, harei alai legaleach chatzi nazir. does he mean to Harei Alai Legaleach, comma, Chatzi Nazir, and there's no such thing? Or is Harei Alai Legaleach, and the Chatzi is going back on the Alai? Harei Alai Chatzi Legaleach Nazir. Right. That's right. So let's see the Gemara. So the Gemara explains as follows. Rav Meir Sabar, Kivan Damar Harei Alai, once you said Harei Alai, we know you're referring to the Karbanos of a Nazir because you finished your sentence. So, but once you said Harei Alai, right away Yichayev Akulei Karban Nazirs. Yichayev. V'chik Amar Chatzi Nazirs, Lav Kol Kabinei. It doesn't stop it. Where does Rav Meir say this? Remember we had a case where someone had a Karban Oila here, and they had a Karban Shlomim here, and then he took an animal of Chulin, and he said, Harei Timuras Oila Timuras Shlomim. What does Rav Meir say there? Rav Meir said, you chop on the first thing he said, it becomes a Timuras Oila. Once it's a Timuras Oila, it can no longer become a Timuras Shlomim. Remember, we looked at Rabbi Yosy holds, you also look at the second thing that he said. Right? We had it a couple of days ago. But Rabbi Meir holds, you always focus on the first thing that he said. The moment he said Harei Alai, he was already mechuyev fully in all of the karbonos of a nazir, and therefore anything that he says later that could adjust it, correct it, change it, we do not listen to. And that's why Rabbi Meir holds he has to pay for the full karbonos of a nazir. But the Rabbanan argue, Rabbanan Savi, no, we look at the end, and it's a neder upesach imayu. It's a neder with a modification. It's not a pesach that I'm chosher on the whole thing, but it's a neder with a clarification. And the way you read it is Harei Alai Chatzi Geluach of a Nazir. Because the Chatzi is going back on the Alai, he's only being kabbalah upon himself to pay for half of the karbonos of a Nazir. Okay,
what if he just meant that he wanted to be a Nazir for 15 days? And he didn't understand that you couldn't do that, but he just thought you could.
But he's not committing himself to any type of Naziris here. Here he's committing himself to pay
sponsorship. The sponsorship here.
Yeah.
So we're not delving into the Naziris and the structure of the Naziris. We're just delving into what he obliged himself to pay for.
Shkoyach.
Have a good Tavach. So,
Are you learning tomorrow morning? Are you learning tomorrow?
I'm learning tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. and at 9 a.m. Daniel told me he's planning to be back for tomorrow night. But I'm learning in the same place over here at 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. Right over here in the shiur room in the basement in the Chabad house,
the media room.
in the Akivas Chabad house, and we're also going to be on channel 1 603-550-7613, both at 7 and at 9.
So you're continuing tomorrow at 9.
That's right. I'm continuing on this Mishnah, and I believe this is what Daniel's going to learn tomorrow night.
Okay, Yossi. Have a good evening.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. What are the roads like?
The roads are clear.
I mean the sidewalks.
The sidewalks are horrific.
Oh.
The sidewalks are horrific.
Okay.
Especially in front of 3636.
Yeah, tell me about it.
You can't get through there.
Okay. I'll